Hello everyone, I'm Rick Janzen. Welcome to my fly bench. Hey, it isn't often that you come across a fly pattern that's so versatile. You can fish it for coho on the beaches as well as stream fishing for rainbow trout. But that's exactly the pattern I've got for you today. This last fall I was fishing my local beaches for coho and I came across a few gentlemen from the UK. We got to talking and comparing patterns and I was quite surprised at the pattern he showed me, which he was using to good effect. I call it Laird's Stonefly. It's actually a stonefly pattern they developed for fishing their streams in England, and yet the coho on this stormy day were smashing it with relish. So let's take a look at the materials you're going to need to tie Laird's Stonefly. Alright everybody, what I've got in my vise here today is a Togen's Streamer number 8 3x long hook. Okay, for streams and trout I would probably go down to number 10, maybe a 12, and for coho I like these number 8s. On that I've added a 7/64 brass bead. Now the original pattern had 2 beads. I've done little modifications here to the fly. And if my friends from the UK are watching, you'll have to, I'll beg your indulgence. To replace the weight of the second bead, I'm putting on some .010 lead wire in behind the bead. And what I like to do is I like to take the coil like this and just wrap it around the shank, keeping it on the coil with my tag end there. And then I'll pull on the tag end to wrap it around the shank of the hook until I've got it all wrapped up to the tight like that, and then jam it up against the bead, and that's when I will then pinch off the remainder and it stays on the spool. Now I've got a little goofed up here, so we lost a few coil turns there. So now I'll pinch that off, jam it up against the bead, and then we'll take care of the rest of the tag ends with the thread. Okay. Now with the thread I'm going with 6/0 black unithread, and we're going to come in that behind that lead wire and make a few wraps to get it attached, but I don't want to tighten it up so much that I don't have some space here ahead of the bead, because we're going to be finishing the fly with a head of thread in front of the bead. I want to leave some slack there so as not to use up all that space. And we're good to go there. It looks a little loosey-goosey right now, but trust me, this is all going to tighten up at the end, right? Now we're going to bring the thread back to the bend of the hook. Whoop. What's going on there? I got a little undoing of the, there we go. That's the tag end I forgot to cut off. It got wound up there. And we'll bring that back to the bend of the hook. Looks a little untidy, but trust me, the materials are going to cover that up. And I want that slack there in front. The first item to come in is a pair of goose biots, and I'm going with a burnt orange and amber, they call it on the package. And we'll get 2 of those stripped off the main stem. I actually have got 3 there. I'll save that one for another fly. And then we're going to turn these back to back. I like to moisten my fingers when I handle goose biots. It helps because they're so slippery. and get those pulled apart. Pulled apart, and then set them back to back so it curves outward. And again, a little moisture in, so we've got them set up to curve outward like that. Now I'm just going to slide them against each other a little bit to try to even those tips. There we go. Got the tips nice and evened up. I'm going to set them on here so that it flares outward on the tail. Now we're going to go with a loose loop method, a pinch and loop, and then we're going to do a second one, and we get those goose buyouts set in place. The loose loop method is one of the most useful things for buyouts. They're such tricky little devils to deal with that you need all the help you can get, and the loose loop method is my method of getting them on there securely. Now I'm just bringing that forward so that when I cut them off, they don't shift. We don't want those buyouts to shift on the tail. We've got those nicely set in place there now on the top of the hook, flared outward. Now I'm going to bring that thread forward to about the 3/4 point, just behind the lead, and we're coming in with some 8-pound test monofilament. I like to use a clear, not a colored one, and the original pattern had the monofilament rib, and this is what I've stuck with. You can go to wire if you want to add a little more weight. If you got fast flowing streams, the originator of this pattern also ties them with a wire rib, but I'm going with the one he was using for coho that day. And I'm just tying that down on my side of the hook here, going down toward the tie-in point of the tail. So we've got that secured in there. I'm going to set that back in the holder. Our main body material is hare's ear dubbing in the natural. Okay, so we're going to go with that. And I like to put a little wax on my fingers, rub it on the thread. It aids in the doubling process. And just tiny little pinches toward the tail of the fly. We're going to go with a nice taper. We want it to taper from thin to thick up toward the thorax here. Okay, so we're going to go very light toward the tail, the abdomen of the fly actually, and the tail, and we'll just get that barely covered with some dubbing like that, just to cover up our tying thread. And then we start adding more as we move forward on the fly. So just building it up here a little bit as it moves forward. And we get a little more in there. And get that little bit of bulk toward the thorax of the fly. And we get a little more in there. Building it up, a nice taper. You can see there's a bit of a taper happening there now. There we go. We get a little bit of extra bushiness there right at the thorax. It doesn't hurt the fly at all. Okay, so we're going to bring that rib forward now. And the exact number of turns isn't consequential. We just get about 4 or 5 turns in there. 2, 3, 4. And we finish off 4.5 there. Should be good. And a couple of 3 wraps in behind it. Then about 4 or 5 in front to lock it in place. And we cut the tag end of that mono off. It makes a nice clean rib on there. Okay, so our shell back is going to be pheasant tail, center tail of a pheasant. Ringneck pheasant, and we're going to go with a fairly thick chunk of that. I want about 10 or 12 fibers, if I can get that, and I use my bobbin to help separate out where I want exactly. And you'll see why as we get that set in place there. Now I'm aligning them, I'm bringing the tips, holding them so the tips are forward. And then I'm going to do again the loose loop method to pinch and tie in. And we get that tied in there, and then I'm going to bring the thread forward to the bead, capturing that, making sure it's well tied in. We don't want it slipping out, and then back again toward onto the body. I'm going to cut those tag ends off here. Tie like that. I want to make sure I still have a little slack in that bead there in front of, yep, it's moving back, okay. Our rubber legs come in next, and Togan Silly Legs in white black is the kind I'm using. The original pattern had straight white, but I wanted to throw a little more contrast into those legs, so I've gone with a white black. And I'm going to cut off just a single strand of that, which I will use for all 4 legs. Now to get those folded over themselves and try to get those tips even as possible, bring those legs up to the tie-in point there, and we're going to cut them a little long. We got them, you can see, about as long as the tail almost, but we will cut them to length afterwards. A loose loop method to get those in there, and a second turn, and then we can kind of position those legs and get them set forward there. And then what we're going to do is pull the rubber legs forward, give them good length there without stretching them. We just want to pull them straight and then snip them off so that we've got some length in front. We can use that spare piece on our next fly, and it works out perfectly to tie 2 flies with that. So we'll get that tied in there, bring the thread forward, and then we'll spread those legs, do some figure 8s to get them separated a bit. There we go. When I'm happy with that, we're going to come in with our dubbing. So at this point, this is what our fly looks like from on top. So now I'm going to bring my thread back, and we're going to finish off with some dubbing here, the thorax region of the fly. And it doesn't have to be a ton, but we want to cover up all those thread wraps and get those legs set into place so that they are well formed and sticking out at some angle from the fly. Now I'm going to come in, pull those back legs forward, come in behind there with some dubbing. We're going to do a little figure 8 here, trying to separate those back legs there. A little bit fussy, you got that pheasant tail in there, and you want to get those legs pulled out. There we go. Pull them out a little further. There we go. A little more dubbing. There's a little bit of work to this fly, but it's well worth the effort. Have a fly, and it's quite a contrast from the normal coho flies. Most of my normal fall coho flies are quite flashy. Klausers, California Neal, they have some shine and sheen to them. This is sort of a dull gray, and it's what surprised me so much about the fact that he was using it. And I guess I shouldn't have been. A lot of people like Murray's Rolled Muddler as well for coho fishing on the beaches in the fall. And that's a dull, very dull pattern. It doesn't have a lot of shine or sheen or glitter to it or color. Okay, so now that we've got those legs in place, we've dubbed up the thorax region around them. Okay, we've got those legs sort of forming a nice X there. We're going to finish off the thread here, tie it off. I'm going to throw a half hitch in there first, pull those and just tie it off right in behind the bead, and give it a little whip finish. And then, so we've got our whip finisher, we pull those leg back. Wait a second, that whip finish came undone on me. There we go. Pull those legs back, and then whip finish just with 3 or 4 turns here behind the bead. Cut that off. Bring our thread in front of the bead. This is the way you don't have to cross over the bead with your thread. And then we'll cut the tag end of that off. Now we bring our pheasant tail forward to form the shell back. And I'm going to draw those legs back and bring the pheasant tail forward at the same time. Pinch that all in place there. A loose loop method, then tighten up and finish our head. We give it a good multiple turns here, 10 or 15 turns. We're going to cut off these tag ends now. Don't need those there. And then a little Sally Hansen's, hard as nails, on the thread to help cement the head. Let it drip down into those threads down there, into the head. And then we're going to whip finish the same. Stick the whip finisher tool on the thread, pull those legs back again. And again, I was able to somehow lose the hold on the whip finisher. Pull those back. And we're going to turn it, give it 4 or 5 turns here in front of the bead. So you see that shell back covers the bead from on top. It's not visible from on top. Like that. And we're going to cut those legs to length and do a little tidying up of this fly before we're done. Alright, we want to get those legs cut to length, and we're just going to bend them forward and then give them a little cut so they're just, you know, a 1/4 inch past the eye of the hook, a little shorter. And we're going to shorten these back ones too. We don't want them quite that long. Alright, there. Now you can get an idea of the length there. They stick out from the body. And now I'm going to just trim up some of these guard hairs of the hare's ear nymph, hare's ear dubbing. Just without cutting my legs anymore or without cutting my goose biots off, which I have been known to do. Tidy that up. I want to do that before I do the final epoxy work because I don't want the epoxy get this stuff to get stuck in the epoxy. And just blow off some of those loose fibers, the really long ones. It's a nice stonefly pattern, and I was quite pleasantly surprised at how well it hooked Chinook. So there we go. We're going to lock that vise in place, tidy that up a little bit. And then I'm using Loon Outdoors UV Clear Fly Finish in Flow to put a hard shell on the shell back here. We're going to put a nice thick coat of that on there and give it a zap with UV light. And right away I'm going to touch that, make sure it's cured, yep, and then give it a second coat to really secure that pheasant tail and a nice hard shell back in place there. So there you have it, Laird's Stonefly. I can't wait to use it next spring on the streams around here on Vancouver Island, where we have stonefly hatches, and maybe the cowichan, the oyster, Campbell, and some of the other streams I fish for trout in the spring. But also it's going to be a standard in my coho salmon beach box now because of the way it works so well for my friends from England there. Thanks for watching. I wish you the best of luck this season. Enjoy the tying season and stock up your box. Make sure this is if you're a coho fly angler, you like the beaches, rivers, you could even be great in the rivers. I would anticipate it also being quite effective there. So if you like what you watched here, please consider subscribing to my channel, hit that like button, and feel free to share this pattern with your friends. Thanks for watching.